We like to call it the Supernatural Hour. And now, our hosts.
Hey, welcome to the Supernatural Hour.
Okay, you have to tell how festive we are. We're like super festive.
I'm kind of digging Don's sweater. I like the little 8-bit Krampus sweater he's got going on.
I researched shirts on Amazon, and I'm wearing a Krampus shirt.
I can see.
We'll have to post pictures on the little Facebook.
I can see your research shirts. So tell us about your Krampus shirts. They look like ugly sweaters, but they're T-shirts, which I'm not sure counts as an ugly sweater.
Well, I didn't want to spend a ton of money on a shirt. I probably wouldn't wear a whole lot, so we did the cheap T-shirts.
I would totally wear that in like July, being it's a T-shirt.
Yeah, I got kind of the happy Krampus, kind of like what your 4-year-old could wear, and
the happy Krampus with the Gene Simmons tongue.
Yeah. So then Don's got more of the creepy, demonic-y looking one. Some of them were really scary. I didn't want to be like totally evil, but
Don's Krampus looks like, as Tim said, like 8-bit graphics.
Mine's carrying off a little kid in a bag, so that's a little creepy.
Oh wow!
See.
It's like he's all happy about it too. That's kind of twisted.
Yeah, they're all happy. Even the kid looks a little happy, to be honest with you. He's like, hey, hello.
Krampus is like, sweet, I'm kidnapping this kid.
And the kid's like, woo.
And the kid's like, all right, I'm gonna die.
Krampus is gonna drag me down to hell for a year.
I mean, if Chunga here would be like, baby Spinari, I'm dead. I've got a really important story. Krampus is kidnapping me.
All right, so let's talk Krampus. So Krampus is kind of interesting because really experts can't decide whether or not Krampus. There's really no set origin for Krampus.
No, there isn't. That's the kind of the cool thing about it.
It's kind of believed that Krampus may have started with the pre-Christian Alpine cultures. It's also believed that it could be Norse mythology. It could also be kind of a
derived from some kind of pagan culture or ritual.
Greek mythology was also kind of pointed at, and it really could be.
It's all over the place.
And it really could kind of be derivative of all these things.
Right, and it seems like from the, I'll use the word again, research that I did, it seemed to really kind of take off in the Eastern Europe, Bavaria area.
Right, so it kind of seems like the real area where it's really kind of focused at seems to be Germany, Austria, and kind of those countries. It kind of
like Slovakia, right. Czech Republic, Slovenia,
Croatia.
Just that whole area right there. And it even got up into like Norway and Sweden.
Right.
Yeah, the Norse part of it, yeah.
And it's interesting because Krampus actually derives from the word Krampunkt, which is German for claw. And so that's kind of where the name comes from, is he's the claw. And basically, you've got St. Nicholas, who is a happy, good, smiley, Santa Claus-y type individual, and Krampus is kind of like the evil twin of St. Nicholas, if you will. Almost as if St. Nicholas represents God, and Krampus represents the devil.
Or good and evil, or yin and yang, that type of thing.
Well, it has to balance out. I mean...
Right, well, you can't have good without evil, and you can't have evil without good.
That's kind of what the whole representation between Krampus and St. Nicholas was. Some of these cultures, they thought that these two actually worked together when it came to the Christmas time and the holiday and that.
Yeah, in fact, it's kind of interesting, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but the whole mythology behind Santa leaving a lump of coal was kind of... basically Santa's calling card for, hey Krampus, the kid with the coal is yours.
See, it would be a lump of coal or either a set of, was it birch sticks or birch reeds?
Birch sticks. And in some cultures, they would actually paint the birch gold. And what was interesting is in some areas, in some cultures in that region, they would give the children a gold birch stick on Christmas. And the next day, if they received a silver birch stick, that meant that Krampus was a-coming for them. If they got to keep the gold birch stick, then all was well. But if there's a silver birch stick, then you're in for a whooping.
Yeah, I know this.
And Krampus, that was kind of his thing, is when he would show up for these kids, he would either beat them with birch sticks, or he could potentially kidnap them and drag them down to hell to spend a year basically being punished for being a little shit for for a year, and then after that year is over, they could come back and hopefully they'd be fixed.
Well, that's just one of the things. One of the things I read or heard is that part of the Norse mythology, being that Krampus is supposedly the son of Hel, who is the daughter of Loki, and Krampus is basically over the underworld. And so what would happen in that part of the world is that Krampus, when he would kidnap you, he would take you down into the underworld, and you would either be tortured or eaten.
Ooh, that sounds like fun.
No, thank you.
No. I like the other one better. I'd rather have like a jail sentence, like 1 year, and then come back.
And kind of back where you're talking about the Loki thing, Krampus was also kind of thought to be derived from fauns and satyrs from Greek mythology, which is kind of along that same line, going back again to the origins. Now, what was interesting, though, is even though we celebrate Christmas on the 25th, December 5th was actually considered to be Krampus night.
No, you just weed out the bad kids before Santa gets there.
Yeah, it's like Christmas in Germany is basically December 5th. They celebrate it differently.
And so Krampus...
Spoiler alert, Christmas is not December 25th everywhere in the world. Just so you know. Santa Claus doesn't hit every kid in one night.
Suddenly makes so much more sense.
I actually knew that about research I did when I was in the second grade because I had to do a report on Czechoslovakia.
But yeah, basically December 5th was considered Krampus night, and kids were warned before they went to bed not to invite demons into the home. Which, by the way, here on the Supernatural Hour, we invite you not to invite demons to your home every night of the year.
If you get a Ouija board for Christmas, call us and we will dispose of it for you.
After we hit you over the head with it.
Or whoever gave it to you.
No, you. For using it.
Child abuse.
Child abuse.
Child abuse. Elderly abuse.
So now what was interesting is if you go to some of these countries in Eastern Europe, they actually have what they call Krampunkt, which stands for Krampen Night. And they have these parades in these cities where basically people dress up as Krampus. And essentially St. Nicholas leads the parade, but hundreds of people will actually dress up as Krampus. And they kind of parade through the streets of these cities and try and scare children and try and taunt adults and basically kind of whip people's legs with birch sticks.
They make asses out of themselves is what they do.
Right, it's kind of
I've
drunk.
experienced that personally.
Kind of drunken revelry, if you will.
But you know, some of those costumes were pretty creepy.
Right, now Krampus has been described several different ways. Some describe Krampus as more of kind of a man with kind of bestial features. Bestial features. Some describe him more demonic. Some describe him just flat out as a beast. But generally...
Half demon, half goat.
Goat, yeah. That's the one that we have.
I was going to say,
picture of in my home.
Most believe Krampus has got cloven hoofs.
Actually, one cloven hoof and one human foot. Every culture has that.
Really?
Yeah, I read that in one of the articles. And you can even see it in some of the pictures. Like, I think right there on Deanne's shirt, not so much. On Dom's, you can kind of see he's got like one regular foot and one cloven hoof.
Couldn't decide, huh?
No, I'm not sure why that is, but...
On mine, it just looks like feet.
Yeah, but in all variations of what Krampus looks like, that was the one constant thing, is one human foot, one cloven hoof.
He was also known to have a very long, pointed Gene Simmons-style tongue.
Mine does.
Forked.
Dark brown or black hair, usually kind of long and goat-like, and Krampus had goat horns, which both of your sweaters illustrate quite well. So he was kind of a demonic-looking character, if you would. Now, what was interesting with Krampus is he is often viewed with chains. Tell us about the chains, Tim.
So, according to this article that was written back in 1958, the chains possibly represent an attempt to bind the devil that the Krampus represents. This was after, like, kind of Christianity adopted the whole thing in that region there. And that was their thing, because, I mean, at one point in time, they actually tried to ban Krampus in some of those European countries, because they saw it as basically anti-Christian, and
Kind of like worshiping the devil.
yes. So one of the things that they say is the chains represent their attempt to kind of bind the devil that Krampus is.
That some of them think that they come back though from a more paganistic past, and again, kind of going back to the fact that nobody really knows the true origin of Krampus. There is some belief that he originated from some pagan witches' covens, ritualistic rituals, which sounds really redundant.
He was summoned, basically, is what happened.
Right. In
They
fact,
conjured, they did a conjuring and they used a goat, like an actual goat, as the conduit. So, and then he grew into a man. So that's why some people think that he's half man or half goat or just a beast, because they had to use something to bring him to life.
well, and what's interesting is going back to the birch branches that they're whipping people with and that they're giving kids, is in the coven type stuff, the birch branches actually symboled phallic virility, if you will.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like a great big dong made out of birch is kind of what those sticks represent, so to speak. I can't believe I said dong on the podcast.
Me neither.
In fact, there's actually a writer who back in the 1950s said, and I'm going to quote him here, he says, "There seems to be little doubt as to his true identity, for no other form is a full regalia of the horned god of the witches so well preserved. The birch, apart from its phallic significance, may have a connection with the initiation rites of certain witch and covens, rites which entail binding and scourging as a form of mock death. The change could have been introduced in a Christian attempt to bind the devil, but again, they could be a remnant of pagan initiation rites."
That's the article I was just quoting.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I didn't read the whole thing. I was just talking about the chains part of it.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because Krampus has kind of been more of a European belief, but recently he's kind of made a resurgence in pop culture. I mean, with the movie in 2015, Krampus, and you start to see and hear, I mean, the TV show Supernatural, if anyone ever watches Supernatural, they've got an episode involving Krampus. I think they killed Krampus in the episode, I can't remember.
So one thing before we get too much into the pop culture part of it, one of the things that they used to do is with those golden birch sticks, they would use those as a decoration in the homes, and they put them up on the walls, and it would be a constant year-round reminder for the kids to be good. So they would see it every day, and they were reminded to be good, so Krampus wouldn't come to their house come December 5th.
I also suspect that if their houses were like my home was when I was a child, if you weren't good, that birch stick could be a reminder that you're going to get a whooping if you said a swear or did something you weren't supposed to.
Yeah, I think they would have actually been used.
Yes.
Yikes.
But I do believe our mom used a wooden spoon a time or two on my backside.
I may have had a belt once or twice. I turned out okay.
That doesn't surprise me. But I can't say much because I've had a belt or two or a
Back in the
switch or
days
two.
when your parents could spank you
Yeah, that was back in the
in the good old days.
70s. I'm old.
When America was great,
Yeah,
I guess.
So that's kind of it on Krampus. So really, to be honest with you, it was surprisingly not a whole lot on Krampus. Is there anything else any of you guys would like to add on Krampus?
Yeah, because Annie, my great-great-grandfather, Anton, he was from Austria. And so when Annie came down to be with him, they instilled that in each generation on my grandfather's side. So all of us had to grow up with the whole Krampus thing. And the way that they worked it for us here in America, kind of trying to culturize things. So if we came down from downstairs and we woke up, and if there was a switch in it, there was like a switch at all in our stockings, that means we were bad and we were going to get a whooping. But if we were good, it was filled with candy and money and all kinds of goodies.
Peaches got a lot of sticks.
No, I didn't. I was a really good kid. I was just curious.
So did anybody get a stick? I'm curious.
A couple of my cousins did one year, but I think it was just because their parents were playing a trick on them just to see how they would react to getting a switch, but we mostly got candy.
Now if you got a switch in your sock, you'd be glad because Nintendo makes those. It's a video game system.
I got a switch.
You're so funny.
Anyway, so that is Krampus. Now, what was kind of interesting, though, is I did this research. I know that, Tim, you did some ghost stories, which we'll get into here in just a minute. As I was looking into Krampus, I kind of found some old interesting facts about Christmas in general that I'd like to kind of touch on. The Christmas tree itself was actually a Norse tradition during the winter season when food was sparse, and basically that time of year they'd have a big celebration around December 25th where they'd eat a lot of meat. Meat wasn't normally available, but when winter came around, they killed a large portion of their livestock because it was easier to feed fewer livestock than lots of them, and they would just reproduce and have new livestock in the spring. So they'd have these big festivals, and they'd bring in the biggest log they could find. It was called the yule log, and they'd bring it over the fire, and it would burn, sometimes up to 12 days, because, I mean, it was a humongous log. And while this log burned, the sparks, they would say each spark represented a new sheep or cow that was going to be born the following year, and they would just feast and party and have fun. And they used to bring in an evergreen tree to symbolize life, because winters were so cold and sucky that it was kind of a reminder that, hey, you know, this tree can survive the winter, we can survive the winter, and then it'll be spring again. And so that's kind of where the Christmas tree originally came from. They also used to decorate a lot with holly. Now, what was interesting is when the Christian religion started to kind of take Europe by storm, they kind of appropriated a lot of the traditions that were already going on in Europe at the time. They decided that Christmas tree stood for everlasting life, attributed it to Christ, and then they started hanging apples on it to represent the Garden of Eden. And those apples have basically become now our glass round Christmas bulbs. The holly, they decided symbolized the crowns, or Christ's crown of thorns. So basically, when Christians took over Europe, they took all these pagan beliefs, all these Norse beliefs, and instead of saying you can't do this anymore, they just kind of like, hey, that thing you guys believe about the thing now means this instead. And so they just kind of appropriated cultural things that were still there. Now, Christmas in England, up until 1652, was kind of a riotous party. Mm-hmm. Basically, peasants could show up at the Lord's house and for a day or two eat his food, kind of be in charge, and the Lord just had to kind of suck it. And if they didn't, they basically got a trick, kind of like trick or treat.
Yep.
They would, you know, play pranks on the Lord and do mean things if he didn't basically go by it.
And you're not meaning the Lord Jesus Christ, you're meaning the Lord of the Manor.
The Lord of the Manor.
There you go.
In 1652, Oliver Cromwell, when they deposed the monarchy, they actually outlawed Christmas in England for a number of years.
But we celebrate it anyway.
Right, and people would kind of celebrate it on the side. In the Americas, when the Americas first were colonized, the Puritans were like, yeah, we're not doing Christmas. And so Christmas kind of creeped back in around the early 1800s. And St. Nicholas became Santa Claus, and Krampus kind of went by the wayside. They didn't like him because he wasn't a happy thing. So they got rid of the
Well, they were too busy drowning people and hanging them.
for being witches and staking vampires.
Well, technically,
they didn't have time for a bad guy that stole children. They had to hunt down the witches.
And interestingly enough, American Christmas is kind of
it's Hallmark.
well, but it's kind of gone worldwide at this point. We've kind of spread that commercialism everywhere.
Right, but before that, like pagan, that all came first. So it was basically a political battle between the pagans and Christianity, and they kind of just decided to line up all the Christian holidays with all the pagan solstices, and that's why we have Christmas on the 25th. It's because it's the pagan holiday for the winter solstice.
Right, they actually just kind of, again, appropriated all the pagan holidays.
Yeah, it was a political move to gain members into the church and what have you.
So when the witches were celebrating Samhain, the Christians were, it's All Saints Day. You're celebrating with us.
Yes.
That's not what we're doing at all. Yes, you are.
It just so happens, that whole thing.
Exactly. So there's your history of Krampus and a brief history of Christmas. Tim, do you have some Christmas ghost stories for us?
What I have is kind of like the origin or why they used to tell Christmas ghost stories. If you ever heard the Christmas song by Andy Williams, it's the most wonderful time of the year. There's a line in there where he says, there'll be scary ghost stories, and it tells of the glories of Christmas is long, long ago. So
Will you sing that, please?
What? There'll be scary ghost stories and tells of the glories of Christmas is long, long ago.
Good, we couldn't just have one singer. Excellent. Okay, you may continue.
I'm sure a lot of people have heard that line and they're kind of confused about the scary ghost stories because it's not a tradition that's still done today. So this was actually something that was, and I'm sure Peaches is very familiar with this, because this is something that was popular that happened in England. They got together basically every Christmas Eve, December 24th or 25th or whatever it was, and they would sit by the fire, and they would tell different ghost stories that they've come up throughout the year. Basically, it's so this article I've got, it basically talks about a little bit how modern Christmas traditions, kind of what you guys just talked about, were either borrowed from pagan winter festivals or invented by the English during the mid-19th century. Things like that is like people still send Christmas cards, they decorate the evergreen trees, they go door-to-door caroling and stuff stockings with candy. Most Christmas, at least the way we celebrate it here in America, is a product of Victorian England.
Exactly. Woohoo, go England!
So it goes on and talks about how ghost stories were kind of one of the biggest parts of that practice. It says they would gather around the fire on Christmas Eve to tell ghost stories. Was as much part of Christmas for Victorian English as Santa Claus is for us. Traces of the now forgotten tradition occasionally appear in noticeable places of Christmas time, although their significance is generally overlooked.
Like Christmas Carol.
Charles Dickens.
Yes, exactly. That's where I'm getting into next. It says the most obvious example of how Victorian ghost stories have persisted to some degree in modern Christmas celebrations is Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol.
Yeah, in fact, we watched 2 versions of it the other day, and we still need to watch the Muppet Christmas Carol because you can't have Christmas without the Muppet Christmas Carol.
That has been on my wish list for like 6 years, and my family keeps not buying it for me on purpose.
Okay, I'm going to have to interject here. It is not Christmas unless I watch Blackadder's Christmas Carol.
It's not Christmas unless you watch Die Hard.
My family,
Christmas movie.
we watch the Christmas Carol instead of telling stories. We just watch the Christmas Carol.
So it says some people that argue Dickens' Christmas ghost story single-handedly saved the winter holiday from dying out during the Industrial Revolution, because at that time England wasn't really celebrating Christmas, and
It was outlawed.
so he reintroduced many century-old traditions with his instant holiday classic. It's become so much a part of Christmas and its various film adaptations and theatrical versions that people don't even wonder why Dickens chose, of all things, 4 spectacle visitors to bring about Ebenezer Scrooge, his transformation. Most people, nowadays we kind of tell our ghost stories and celebrate the dead in October, but it was a huge part of December for them.
So Tim, when you hear Christmas carols, does it scare the Dickens out of you?
It goes on to talk about what you said with Oliver Cromwell abolishing Christmas. But it also talks about what Peaches talked about, how Christmas is on the 25th because of the winter solstice. It also says that the festival celebrated the death of light and the subsequent rebirth the following day. For obvious reasons or symbolic connotations that early Christians adopted dates significant to pagan, Roman, and Northern Europeans. So basically, like, because of the whole with the winter solstice, it's basically the longest day of the year, or longest night of the year. Sorry. So it kind of represents the death of light more so. So that's part of the reason why ghost stories were a huge part of Christmas back in the day. It's just because of that time of year. It was also because, like, in December it's a lot colder than it is in October. Apparently in England it was kind of like murkier and kind of that like solemn feeling. So ghost stories were a huge part of Christmas traditions.
I'm going to take you to England, and then you'll see what they're talking
It's on the
about.
list.
And it was also that was, again, kind of going back to our witches and vampires episodes, a very superstitious time where longest night of the day, you sit at home around your campfire, or your hearth fire, I guess you'd call it. You're worried about all the spirits and scary things outside, and you kind of sat around at home and told Christmas ghost stories. Would this be a bad time to tell you guys I've got a Krampus in my leg?
Jesus.
Oh, good Lord.
Corny dad jokes.
What's
Just
that?
saying.
Yeah, corny dad jokes. Lurch is going to listen to this podcast and he's going to bust up laughing. Krampus in my leg. It's so funny.
I thought it was pretty good.
That should be a new tradition for everybody. Instead of watching like Home Alone or some of those other Christmas
Die
stories.
Hard?
Die Hard.
Well, yeah, Die Hard, I guess is...
Die Hard is a Christmas movie, Deanne.
No,
There's
it's
Christmas music. There's Santa Claus.
There's a tree.
There's a tree.
They went to a
I
Christmas
actually read an
party.
article that talked about how Die Hard is it's more of a Christmas movie than some other Christmas movies because of those things that you just said. The Christmas party, the whole soundtrack, most of the soundtrack actually has Christmas songs on it.
What things have to happen for each of you for it to actually be Christmas? And I'll start to give you guys an idea. So give you guys a minute to think. For me, it is not Christmas unless I've watched Better Off Dead, which is also a Christmas movie.
Oh, my $2.
Yes, it is.
And I have to watch Blackadder Christmas Carol, which for those who've never seen Blackadder Christmas Carol stars Rowan Atkinson, who's Mr. Bean for those who don't know, and he's Ebenezer Blackadder, and he's the nicest man in the world, and the Christmas ghost visits him and show him that how he's so nice that he gets basically, he becomes a floor rug, and at the end of the Christmas Carol he becomes an ass.
Mr. Bean is such a dork.
I love Rowan Atkinson.
So those two things have to happen for me for it to be Christmas. Deanne.
Okay, so for me to have it be Christmas, I have to watch A Charlie Brown Christmas. You have to watch some version of the Christmas Carol. You have to watch those robot-y animatronic Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Santa Claus is Coming to Town.
Oh, the stop motion from the 70s?
But you cannot watch Little Drummer Boy, that one's dumb. You also have to have my mom's butter cookies.
Those butter cookies are pretty good. I've had your mom's butter cookies.
They're really good. And that's, if those happen, then it is Christmas.
Don, what has to happen for it to be Christmas for you?
Good question. Gotta get the lights up. Gotta get the house decorated. I think that's a big part of it for me. I like to sit around and smell candles and pine candles and the tree. We have an artificial tree, so I like the pine scented candles or pine scents. But I just like to sit there and have some candles lit and sit there with the Christmas lights.
So Don likes putting up Christmas lights and snorting candles. Don's easy to please. Peaches, what do you have to have for it to be Christmas?
Since I'm English, we have a lot of traditions, so most of it is...
Birthday to rich people's houses and eat their food?
We have to watch...
That's a thing?
A few movies. I always have my go-to, so we always have to watch A Christmas Carol. I do The Nightmare Before Christmas because I'm a big Tim Burton fan. Then we have to watch A Christmas Story and The Peanuts Christmas. Those 4 main ones. I always have to have rum balls. My grandmother, Annie, came up with a recipe that's been handed down, so we eat rum balls on Christmas Eve.
Rum balls are delicious.
And we get to open one present on Christmas Eve, and it's usually pajamas. So I have to have my Christmas pajama thing. And then, yeah, pretty much we just make sure that we don't get a Krampus stick. Still. No. I do it with my kids, too.
I thought you were going to say like a Krampus in your leg. Tim.
A Krampus switch.
You know, unfortunately, I'm going to have to be the Ebenezer Scrooge of the group here. I worked in retail for about 11 years, which means I did about 11 or 12 Black Fridays. Retail kind of killed Christmas for me because I was always at work, dealing with all the people that were doing the last-minute Christmas shopping, getting all angry at you and yelling at you because you don't have the stuff that they want because they're procrastinators and don't get their shopping done early like Laura and Aaron do and have their Christmas shopping done in August.
Mine is done.
But it was just like, for me, I was always working throughout my 20s and into my 30s here. So I personally, like, for me, Christmas is, I used to buy my own Christmas presents and give my mom the receipt and she'd reimburse me. Now it's just, here's a list of all the movies I want and she buys them and then I let my nieces and nephews unwrap them because usually when they're done unwrapping their own presents, they start crying because they don't have more to unwrap, so they unwrap all of mine, and that seems to kind of get them over. So I guess that's what makes Christmas for me is being able to see my nieces and nephew unwrap stuff.
Aw, cute.
But then if and when I finally get the Muppets Christmas Carol, I'll start watching that every year, and that's when it will be Christmas for me. So until my family decides to stop playing this mean joke on me, it will be Christmas for me when I can watch the Muppets Christmas Carol.
Yeah, you're an adult and you can buy it yourself, right?
Yeah, that would be too easy. I want to see how long they're going to keep playing this joke on me.
I have to have my manger up, too. I bought a really pretty one, so I have to put that up every year.
So can I tell you the weirdest thing? my kids, when they were little, I was at the store one day and they had those, those really cheap nativity or those countdown to Christmas advent calendars that have just the crappy nasty chocolate in it. Well, I'd get it for them because they're like $1, so you buy it for them. Well, I gave them to them every year, and about 3 years ago, when they're very old for kids, and still living in the home, I didn't buy them one year. And they complained. It's like it was the worst Christmas ever for them. So I still have to make sure that I buy this cheap-ass, crappy candy so they can have the best Christmas ever.
That's why you start getting the advent calendars that have like different whiskeys in them.
The kids.
Yeah, the alcohol ones, yeah.
Yeah, so if I don't buy those really cheap advent calendars, it is just the worst Christmas ever at my house.
Christmas for me actually is when I get to go do Christmas shopping with Peaches.
Yeah, it's fun.
I do a lot of my Christmas shopping. Not all my Christmas shopping, but a lot of my Christmas shopping I do from the comfort and safety of my chair in front of my computer on Amazon.
Me too.
And Brandy's work brings it to me.
Yes. That's what UPS does.
I think I bought very little stuff at an actual store.
All right. Well, we're going to call that a slightly shorter episode than usual.
Around the Christmas tree, have a happy holiday.
And do Rudolph. Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer. Do Krampus. Krampus the goat horn demon. Had a very hairy back. And if you looked and saw it, there were kids inside that sack.
Oh, Jesus.
That's awesome for just coming up with that on the top of your head.
All right, everybody. Thanks a bunch. Merry Christmas.
You've been listening to the Supernatural Hour at AdvancedParanormal.com. The Supernatural Hour is part of the Radio Ronin network found at RadioRonin.com. Copyright 2021 by Advanced Paranormal Services.